Chapter 63 of Isaiah, verse 1 says, "Who is this who comes from Edom with dyed garments from Bosra? This one who is exalted in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I, who speak in righteousness, mighty to save." So the first verse says a lot, so I'm going to go seeing each part. In Hebrew it says, "Me say." So who is this who comes from Edom? Edom, as we know, is the brother of Jacob. Jacob, who became Israel. Edom is the name that was given to him after receiving Esau. Esau, because he was born pretty much ready. It is said that he even had already some of his beard and teeth. So Esau means done. He was he looked pretty much like an adult when he was born. On the other hand, Edom was given to him because he had red hair, and it is said also that his skin, his complexion, was reddish. So he was called Edom. Also, Edom means red. The name was given because he sold his firstborn right to receive the double portion, meaning to become the high priest of the household and to receive the world to come. Esau did not believe in the world to come. He did not believe in the resurrection, so he thought that that was stupid. So he sold it for some food, and the food was red. So that is also another reason why he was given the name Edom. From this story, well, there are many things that we need to understand in order to comprehend what is being said in this prophecy. As I always say, Abraham represents Yahweh. That's why the name Abraham, exalted father, and then Abraham, which means father of multitudes. They both have the name, or in the name, the word father, which is Ab in Hebrew. That's why Abraham. So Father, the Almighty, is represented by Abraham. From Abraham came Yitzhak first, as the promised seed, the only begotten son, as he was called, and the only son of Abraham, as he was called, to represent the only begotten son of Yahweh, Yahushua. And then from Yitzhak came Jacob, and those are the patriarchs: Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob. Yahweh presents himself as the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, because Yahweh as father is represented by Abraham, and his two manifestations on earth are represented by Yitzhak and Jacob. That's why Yahweh asked Abraham to go and sacrifice Yitzhak, because Yahushua, the son of Yahweh, would be sacrificed for our sins. Then comes Jacob, which represents the second coming. So Jacob, as the last, comes for the 144,000, who are 12,000 from each tribe. That's why Jacob became the father of the 12 tribes. The last, through his testimony, through his doctrine, his teaching of the true doctrine, will become the spiritual father of all the 144,000 who follow that doctrine. So Jacob represents the last. When we understand that, we gotta see through the life of Jacob in order to understand the second coming, or at least see certain details that show how the last would manifest. And this chapter is a prophecy regarding that. Like I said, Jacob bought the firstborn right, the right to as the firstborn of Yitzhak from Esau with some food. and that's why he was called Edom, because he was red food. So that word Edom reminds us of how Yaakov bought that right for the world to come and to receive the double portion, meaning this world and the world to come, and other things that I will be explaining as we read the chapter. So Edom reminds us of the purchase of that right, which also reminds us of how Jacob not only bought the right but also took the blessing, which pretty much was his because he bought the right to it, but Yitzhak didn't know, so that's why he did it, entering like a thief in the night. That is why Yahushua said that the second coming would be like a thief in the night, meaning nobody would recognize him, just like Yitzhak did not recognize Jacob when he dressed as Esau. Not only because he dressed as Esau, but because Yitzhak had been blinded because he was about to die, and because he had been led by his elder son Esau to love him more, even though he was not righteous. So the fact that he was manipulated to love Esau, pretty much, put it somehow, made Yitzhak eventually lose his sight, because he wasn't able to see that his son was not righteous, Esau. So he lost sight, just like those who rejected Yahushua HaMashiach became blind, or were already. Yahweh blinded them so that Yahushua would be sacrificed for our sins. And then that blindness will be taken away from the true Israelites in the end times to become pretty much the chosen. But the true Israelites, and that's key. That means the most Jewish who are not true Israelites obviously won't be able to understand nor see. Therefore, they will reject the two witnesses, and that will be key for Christians, because Christians won't accept the two witnesses, because they will see if they were the two witnesses, then the Jewish people should accept them. That won't happen. Only the true Israelites will accept the two witnesses. And that's what most people don't understand, the difference between the true and fake Israelites. So since Christians pretty much think of the fake Israelites as fake Israelites, those who call themselves Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, as Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9 speaks of, they are seen by Christians as the chosen. They will not accept the two witnesses. So the Christians will be like, then that means that they are not the two witnesses, because in the Christian doctrine, all Jewish people will listen to the two witnesses. In fact, in most Christian doctrines, the two witnesses are only for the Jewish people, have nothing to do with the Christians, which is obviously also very sad and very wrong. So, like I was saying, Yaakov dressed himself as Esau and entered to get the blessing, while his father was blind. And his father, not knowing who he was, gave him the blessing. So it's like the last who will come as a thief in the night, dressed as Esau, meaning an Israelite dressed as a Roman, an Israelite dressed as a Gentile, as a thief in the night, Yaakov as Esau. That is key, because like I'm saying right now, most Israelites are not seen as Israelites, and most of those who are descendants of Esau, or at least half of them, are seen as Jewish. So we see there that everything is backwards, because just like back in the day, Yaakov dressed as Esau to take the blessing from Yitzhak, then Esau, in revenge, dressed as Yaakov, Israel, to get the blessing from the world, meaning the riches that they want so much. I hope that is being understood, because the enemy started calling good bad and bad good, turning everything around so that those who are Esau would be seen as Israel, and those who are Israelites would be seen as Esau. So now when Yahweh manifests on earth as a true Israelite, he's seen as a son of Esau, as a Gentile, as a Roman. Hope that is being understood. So just like Yaakov dressed as Esau, the last comes as a Gentile. Just like Yitzhak was blind, the world, the congregation is, well, not the true congregation, the world, because of the apostasy, is blind and is not able to see the true Messiah, the true mighty one, the true doctrine, read the scriptures, because of that blindness, because of rejecting the true Messiah. So that is very important. That's how Yaakov entered to get the blessing. That's how Yahweh will enter this world to get what is missing, what's left, to get this world also. Yahushua came and said, my kingdom is not of this world. So Yahushua came to offer something that is completely spiritual, celestial, heavenly. The last comes to bring that and mix it with the earth and fulfill everything in a physical sense, finally bringing peace to the peace to earth, and bringing well, the wrath of Yahweh and the prophecies of the book of Revelation and a bunch of other things. But that's why for 2,000 years many people reject Messiah, because they were expecting a lot of earthly things. But Yahushua came to bring the spiritual, the heavenly first, then the last, with the two portions, with the blessing given to Yahusef, blessings from the heavens, from the earth, and from the abyss also. The last comes to make one reality of heaven and earth, or get it married, pretty much. Just that's why the wedding of the Lamb, Messiah, the heavenly, marrying the congregation, the earthly. So I will read the verse again and say part by part. So Yeshayahu, the prophet, Isaiah, is being given a vision, a prophecy, and he doesn't understand why he's seeing somebody with so much splendor coming from such a bad place. Somebody with so much honor coming from Esau, who is not honorable. So he says, who is this who comes from Edom? So he comes in red. Who is this who comes from the red? Red represents royalty, is connected to royalty, and when it comes to the positive, but in the negative, it represents sin. That's why Yahweh says many times that even if our sins were red as scarlet, he would make them white as snow. That's why there was a thread of scarlet that was in the temple, tied up, and the other half tied up to the male goat that was left for Azazel or Azazel in the desert. There were two male goats, one sacrificed for Yahweh and the other one sent to the desert with all the sins of the people. But when the one sacrificed for the sins for Yahweh and the one with the sins was taken away from the people, then the scarlet thread in the temple would turn white. And that was a miracle that Yahweh would perform to show the people that their sins were forgiven through that sacrifice. Not understanding, sadly, that that sacrifice and all that event was a representation of what happened when Yahushua was placed next to Barabbas. Barabbas means son of the father. So the son of the father, Yahweh, was placed next to the son of the father, his father, Satan, as if they were equals, like the two male goats of Yom Kippur. And the people had to choose one, well, in that case with Yahushua and Barabbas, but in Yom Kippur they would throw lots and they would decide which male goat was for Yahweh and which one for Azazel. So this time Pilate asked the people and they said, sacrifice Yahushua. So Barabbas was that one for Azazel. That was the fulfillment of it. So Yahushua is the one whose sacrifice is taken by Yahweh to forgive our sins. So the red represents sin, white represents pureness, purity, So red and white are like the last and the first. Yahushua came through a virgin, and he committed no sin, so that he could fulfill the Torah and therefore free us from the condemnation given in the law. So Yahushua came spiritually represented by the color white for no sin. The last comes in red, which represents sin, and that is part of what is shown in the parable of the prodigal son. Some people say, and I agree, that it shouldn't be called the prodigal son or the parable of the prodigal son, but it should be called the parable of the father with two children. Because there's a lot of information given there. It's not only about a prodigal son, and I know it is a very great teaching when it comes to all of us who have been in the apostasy, in sin, whatever, coming to the Father and getting to know the truth. But above that, it is a prophecy or a clear teaching regarding the first and last, the one who did not commit sin, who came as a Kohen Gadol to forgive sins, and the last who comes as a king to punish, and for different reasons had to be born as a regular person, and therefore had the inclination to evil, plus would be born in the end times, therefore in a apostasy, being taught falsehood. So all of that is part of the plan, and that is why Yeshayahu back in the day was surprised and couldn't understand who could come with such splendor dressed in red, meaning who from the world of sin could receive such honor. And that has to do with Yahweh manifesting to fulfill what is left, pretty much. So who is this who comes from Edom? As I have explained, who in Hebrew is me, and that's why the name Mikael, who is the Malach who comes at the end, Mikael, who is like Elohim. So like I have said, me represents Yahushua, the one who shows us who is Yahweh. The last is represented by the what, by the ma in Hebrew, ma, because he explains what Yahushua said, what this world is, what Satan was created for, etc. So the first gives wisdom, the last gives understanding, represented by me and ma, who and what. Now here it says, who is this who comes from Edom? We can understand spiritually that he's saying Mashiach, the second time that manifests, will do it from Edom. Who is this who comes from Edom? Meaning the second coming, I repeat, meaning the messenger of Yahushua who testifies of Yahushua. That's why Mikael testifies of the me, who is like Elohim. Yahushua is like the Father Yahweh. That's what Mikael pretty much means. So who is this who comes from Edom with dyed garments from Bosra? Bosra was a place of Edom, and that is the place where Job, the one from the book of Job, he was king of Bosra. As I have also explained, the book of Job represents also the second coming. Somebody who is protected by Yahweh, prospered by Yahweh, but then because of Satan and also Yahweh using that to teach Satan something, teach something to Job, and well, a bunch of other things, Yahweh decides to put Job through a test. That test pretty much will be when the last will die, will be captured and then killed. So that's why Job was not an Israelite, because he represents when Yahweh would manifest as a Gentile, not genetically, but seen by society as a Gentile, because how society has been taught by Satan for many years. So Bosra connects to Job in that story, meaning that once again the last. Bosra has to do with the sheepfold. The sheepfold is what the name Bosra represents. So that shows what Yahushua said in John 10, Yahushua said, I am the door and the good shepherd. That means I am the first and the last. That means I am the one who shows the way to the door to enter eternity. And the last is the good shepherd, who goes through the way which was laid by the first and enters through the door to lead the sheepfold, Bosra, to the Father. The sheepfold also is seen as Gentile. That's why I repeat, most of the chosen few will be seen as Gentiles by most people, not understanding that they are actually Israelites, but they were scattered through the nations, and for hundreds of years were in a certain nation, and through the apostasy and everything were taught that they were whatever of whatever nation where they were sent. So Edom and Bosra, the fact that he comes as the prodigal son of men, with the inclination to evil like everybody, so that nobody can say anything in judgment, because some people would, and I'm sure certain people in the world have thought of it, most likely, in judgment would say to the Almighty that life was not fair and his plan was not fair, because Yahushua never knew what it was to be a slave to sin. Yahushua was tempted, but he never sinned. So since he never sinned, sin didn't enter his body, his self, in order to be every day fighting with a temptation, or what the inclination to evil does. Yahushua went through the temptation just like Eve went through the temptation, but Eve failed because she heard the serpent outside, and when she ate, that evil inclination entered her, and when she gave to Adam, it entered him. So Yahushua, as the last Adam, as it is written in the New Covenant, Yahushua as the last Adam was tested. He was tempted by the serpent, by Satan, but he didn't eat. So he never had the inclination to do evil within him, which is different. Plus, since he never sinned, he was never a slave to sin. So there are a couple things that Yahushua, even though he was in the flesh, didn't experience like everybody else. And that could be an argument that an enemy would try and use to try and change judgment. Yet that is the reason why Yahweh comes as the last, as everybody else, to show that he himself left the way, and that way is possible to go through belief in Mashiach. And therefore, as we are going to see here, Yahweh planned to appear twice on earth in two different times of history, and he planned to be saved by himself when he would come as the Son of Man with inclination to do evil. He would be saved by the time he appeared without that inclination, and that is how he would save himself from the fact that in the second coming, the second manifestation, he would have to enter a body like everybody else and had to go through the same things that everybody else does, so that nobody can say anything before his throne. And to show that the huge blessing that the last receives was offered to every single person in this reality, to show how good Yahweh is. That's why the last represents the good of Yahweh. That's why Yahushua was called good, and he said, why do you call me good? There is only one good, and he's in heaven. Just like in John 3:13, Yahushua says that the Son of Man is in heaven, while Yahushua, Mashiach, was on earth. So that shows that the Son of Man is the one that would come later in time as the second, the last. So I know I'm saying a lot and reading not much, but it is very important to understand all of these things that I am saying for us to see and know why these names are mentioned. So who is he who comes from Edom, from red, as a Gentile, as a Roman, as the prodigal son, with dyed garments from Bosra, as king, as Job, as the good shepherd for the sheepfold, the chosen few and the many. Two sheepfolds, Yahweh will make them one, like body and blood, like Yehuda and Israel. This one who is exalted in his apparel. So Yeshayahu is surprised to see, I repeat, someone in red from Edom being exalted. And this also shows how this represents when Yahweh manifests as king, unlike the first coming when he did it as Kohen Gadol, as a high priest. So this one who is exalted in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength, traveling. Yahushua came to Israel, and he didn't go out of Israel during his ministry. When he was young, he was taken to Egypt to escape Herod, but that was it. He was a child, and to fulfill certain prophecies. But his ministry, his life, was in Israel. He came, like he said, for the lost sheep of Israel. So traveling in the greatness of his strength is connected to the fact that the last comes outside of Israel, like a Gentile, traveling throughout the nations, preaching, teaching, and not necessarily personally. With technology, it's also possible to be somewhere without being physically teaching people, like it is happening right now, thanks to the Almighty, that I'm talking to all of you who are in different places of this world. That's why Yahushua came as the sword, and the last comes as the arrow or the bow, because with a sword you need to fight close, like Yahushua had to be in Israel. The last fights with a bow and arrow, therefore he can throw the teachings long distances. His voice will travel, just like voice travels. The last is the voice of the Malach, the voice of Yahweh, while Yahushua is the word. To read the word, you need to be close to the book, but to hear the word, you can hear the voice even if the book is being read by a person far away. So Yahushua is the word, the sword. The last is the voice, the bow and arrow. It's called the bow. The 144,000 are pretty much the arrows. So the one who is exalted in his apparel. That doesn't mean that the last appears all with expensive clothes and all of that. Remember that the two witnesses dressed in sackcloth, meaning that their appearance won't be like the leaders of this world, religious or political. This has to do with his spirit, soul, which is Yahushua. Yahushua is the one who covers the last, just like we are covered with his blood so that the enemy cannot touch us. The blood is red, so the last is covered in Yahushua, and Yahushua is that honor that he shares pretty much with the last. So he is, just like we all must be, dressed in Mashiach. We must cover ourselves of Mashiach through the body that he left for us through his sacrifice. Because if we present ourselves before Yahweh like without him covering us, Yahweh will punish for our sins, which he would be able to see, because he would be like appearing naked. When we cover ourselves with Mashiach, Yahushua the Lamb, then we are covered, and our shame, our nakedness is not revealed, and therefore we are forgiven. So the fact that the last is dressed in exalted apparel is the fact that the last comes as a king, dressed in Yahushua spiritually. Like I said, the first interpretation would be as the last, fulfilling it spiritually. The last interpretation would be when first and last become one, and it will be physically and literally and obviously exalted even through the vision, because everybody will be able to know already everything. Right now, things are hidden. Right now, people are blinded. Right now, we are in the spiritual night. So things are not seen clearly. But when the veil between the spiritual and the physical is destroyed, then that which is spiritual will be obviously seen. So the spiritual part of this is the last being dressed in Mashiach, Yahushua, meaning being anointed by the Ruach that Yahushua left for all of us. And other interpretation would be for Har Megiddo, when already seen as a king. So traveling in the greatness of his strength, like traveling to war, like traveling through the nations to teach. In the greatness of his strength. And then the answer is, I, who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. So Yahweh himself says to the prophet that it is Yahweh whom he is seeing. So look how the prophet was surprised and didn't recognize Yahweh who was speaking to him. So Yahweh has to say, I, who speak in righteousness. So if the prophet saw the vision and wasn't able to recognize that it was the manifestation of Yahweh, imagine those who are blinded in the world right now. So, I, who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. It says, May the be B'tzedekah Rab Lehoshia, great to save. And in that word, Lehoshia, we can rearrange it and get the name Yahushua. So that's why the last, through the testimony of Yahushua, will become mighty to save. Interestingly enough, it says Rab Lehoshia. Rab is great, something that is multiplied, but it's also somebody who shoots an arrow. Rab, or Rab, as in rabbi, as in teacher, who instructs the way to go, as with an arrow. So this fulfills or confirms what I was saying regarding the last coming as the good shepherd, as the Rab, as the bow, to show Yahushua as the salvation. And Tzedekah has to do with the fact that Romans 10:10 says that with the heart one believes for justification, for righteousness, for Tzedekah, and the mouth one confesses for salvation. So Tzedekah and Hoshea, pretty much justice or righteousness and salvation, like heart and mouth, like the many and the few, because the many who will have to die but then resurrect and receive righteousness is because they only believed in their heart. The few not only believe in their heart but also confess with their mouth Yahushua as Savior, as sovereign, and the fact that Yahweh resurrected him, and therefore receive also the transformation during the harvest. So, I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. So I speak in righteousness as in the fact that the last, since he fell like the prodigal son, then through his belief received righteousness to then become the one who would teach salvation. I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. That's why first speaks to the congregation, teaches the true doctrine, righteousness, and then when he dies and resurrects, takes Satan out and saves the 144,000. So that's why I who speak in righteousness, teaching the doctrine, then mighty to save during the harvest. It says, why is your apparel red? The prophet asks, why is your apparel red? He cannot understand why he's dressed in red when it should be white according to the interpretation of most people. Meaning, why are you dressed in sin? Why are you dressed like Esau? Why is your apparel red and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? Like I said a few moments ago, the few are the body, the flesh, represented by the bread, therefore the wheat in the harvest. The last are the blood of Messiah, of the body, meaning the grapes of the harvest. To receive the wine, we need to press the grapes in the winepress of the wrath. So, the last who comes mighty to save the chosen few, and even justified through Yahushua, of course, the many, will harvest the few and the many as the wheat and the grapes of Revelation 14. And that means that those who are many, who believe in Messiah, but then will be too late for them to receive the true doctrine when the false Messiah appears, they will be killed by the beast, but Yahweh will resurrect them because of their belief and justify them. So let's go for a moment to Revelation 14. It says by the end of it, verse 17, then another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle, because there was another angel who already harvested the chosen few, the wheat. And another angel came out of the altar who had power over fire, and he cried out with a loud cry to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, thrust in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. Those are the many for the harvest as grapes. So the angel thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of Yahweh. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs. So that was the winepress. Then if we go to Revelation 19, which, like I said, first in Revelation 19, like I was saying, Isaiah 63 speaks. One interpretation is when he appears as one of the two witnesses, witness like Moshe. The second interpretation, which is when he will fulfill in a physical sense, is starting from the war of Armageddon, which is found in Revelation 19, where we read verse 11, now I saw heaven open, and behold a white horse, just like the white horse of the witness like Moshe in Revelation 6. So we see he appears in a white horse twice. Christians say that the first white horse is the Antichrist, just because they don't understand the second coming. But it is clear that it is not. The first seal, the white horse, represents the two witnesses starting their testimony. The last comes on a white horse with a bow and a crown, because he comes as the Melech Hagadol. So here it says, now I saw heaven open, and behold a white horse. Second time the white horse appears. The first time was the sixth seal. In the sixth seal pretty much starts the manifestation of one of the interpretations of Isaiah 63. Now here starts the second interpretation of Isaiah 63, all starting with a white horse. So then it says, and he who sat on him was called faithful and true. Like last and first, Yahushua is the truth, and the last comes in faith, faithful to the truth, as the faithful witness. Then it says, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. In righteousness, like Isaiah 63 said, traveling in greatness of his strength, I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. So now it says here in Revelation, and in righteousness he judges and makes war, because he comes, once again I repeat, the first time as a witness. Well, the first, Yahushua, came as a lawyer. The last, as one of the two witnesses, comes as a witness. When they, first and last, become one, then they are the judge. So that's why once the last dies and resurrects, he becomes the judge, even though he came as the witness. Hope that's clear. When he resurrected, he received the authority to judge, just like the 144 receive authority to judge even angels. In righteousness he judges and makes war. Yahushua came to leave on earth a fire and a sword for the last who comes and become the fire, the consuming fire, and hold the sword to kill the enemy. So that's why he speaks of making war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, consuming fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, which is what we are seeing in Isaiah 63. And his name is called the Word of Yahweh. So Yahushua, the name of Mashiach, is the Word of Yahweh. Literally. Obviously, everything that is in scriptures came inspired by the Word of Yahweh. But the Word of Yahweh is not the Bible. The Word of Yahweh is the name of the Son, Yahushua, who inspired everything that is in scriptures. His name is the Word of Yahweh. Then it says, and the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now, and those are the 144,000. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword. That is Mashiach. The Word of Yahweh is the sword. So that means that the last is testifying of Mashiach, because the sword comes from his mouth. And he is given the name of the Word, which is Yahushua. Just like the son of Nun was given the name Yahushua. He was born as Hoshea, and Yahweh gave him the name Yahushua to represent first and last as one. And that's when the people entered the promised land through Jericho with Joshua, Yahushua. So now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations, and he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. This is key. This is huge. Iron. Iron is the metal that represents Rome. And Rome came from Esau, who is called Edom. Red. Red is the color of planet Mars, the god of war, the angel of Rome, Samael. So look how war is connected to Mars, is connected to color red, is connected to, well, to kingship, to blood, to sin, Esau, and a bunch of other things. Well, the metal, iron. Iron is connected with Rome. Iron is connected with Mars. Iron is connected with war. So that's why the last has to come dressed in red as a Roman, as a descendant of Esau, even though he's an Israelite, but like Yaakov dressed as Esau, in order to get the blessing from the enemy, to take that which Yahweh gave to the enemy, for the enemy to rule in this earth. That's why Yahweh appears as one of them, to take it from him. Hope that's even clearer. So now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations. The nations, not just the nation. The nations, because now it's worldwide. The second coming. And he himself will rule them with a rod of iron, because he's king, because he comes as a Roman, because he comes to make war, because he comes dressed in red as Jacob dressed of Esau. Hope all of that is clear, because it's very important. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness of and wrath of Almighty Elohim. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty Elohim. And he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Sovereign of Sovereigns. First and last. So now I'm going to go to Isaiah 63 again. And it says, verse 2, why is your apparel red, and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? We just saw in Revelation 19 how he was the one who treaded the winepress of the wrath of Yahweh, where the grapes, who are the many, were put in the harvest.